Continuation of Chapter 4, The Church and Masonry, an Impossible Dialogue. Freemasonry has never renounced any of these objectives, but since Vatican Council II, churchmen have acted as if everything were possible. Union with Freemasonry was part and parcel of the opening to the world announced by the Council, which was a council of dialogue, of ecumenism. Recently, the German bishops published a document that is most instructive. Quote, "During the years 1974 to 1980, by a mandate of the Bishops' Conference and the United Grand Lodges of Germany, official meetings were held between the Church and Freemasonry. The German Bishops' Conference had commissioned the participants of the colloquia firstly to ascertain the changes that have taken place in Freemasonry, and secondly to investigate the compatibility of membership in both the Church and Freemasonry." End quote. You think you must be dreaming when you read the like. It is so incredible. Quote, "Thirdly, in case of an affirmative answer to the preceding point, prepare public opinion to receive the change in position by publicity campaigns." End quote. The German bishops were ready to make publicity in favor of the union between the Church and Freemasonry. They were going quite far in the opening, as Ploncard d'Assac wrote. Why? The German bishops tell, quote, "Because the Church is open to dialogue with all men of good will and willing to meet with all groups who are well disposed." End quote. Moreover, Paul VI insisted on this by widening the theoretical foundations, and he indicated the practical orientations to follow, the various circles with whom it would be suitable to open dialogue, since the freedom, correctly understood, of man in his private, religious, and public life, as recognized by the Church in a special way in Vatican Council II, offered a basis for dialogue with Freemasonry. What the German bishops explained in this text is very serious. For the adopting of religious liberty in almost the same terms as Freemasonry would mean permitting the freedom to believe, the freedom of all religions, and thus the freedom of error. Freemasonry is all in favor of this, inasmuch as by its humanist attitude they consider themselves bound to enlist themselves in favor of human liberty, which is tantamount to their position on the rights of man. Evidently, the rights of man to do all he likes, and to have all he desires. The German bishops also suggest that since German Freemasonry supports charitable institutions, this would permit certain points of contact between them and the Church, whose vocation is essentially one of charity. Finally, the German bishops say, quote, "From the fact that in our disoriented time certain people find the satisfaction of unsatisfied needs in the symbol and rites of Freemasonry, just as in the Catholic Church symbols and rites have always had a place, one can presume that here also can be found a point in common and a basis for mutual understanding." End quote. A point in common between the diabolical satanic rites of Freemasonry and the liturgy of the Church. That such a phrase could appear in an official episcopal document is truly inconceivable. Fortunately, they correct themselves a little in a certain manner, as Ploncard d'Assac observes, quote, "Now the text of the Bishops' Conference takes on its weight and worth. Up to this point, it seemed to be woven of the gullibility, illusions, and compromises we have just heard. But then suddenly the tone of the text changes, fortunately." End quote. Quote, "The opinion on the dual membership in the Church and Freemasonry was favored by a completely false way of interpreting the last council, which followed upon the press campaign that was just mentioned." End quote. Well then, where do they stand? Quote, "In order to make a really adequate examination of the problems, it was necessary to study the essence of Freemasonry." End quote. So the bishops have studied this official ritual. Quote, "Behold what was learned. The fact that Freemasonry calls into question the very existence of the Church has not changed. It suffices to read the Masonic program, Theses for the year 2000, published this year shortly after the conclusion of the colloquium. There they deny in principle the worth of revealed truth, hence they deny dogma, and as a consequence of this indifferentism, all revealed religion is discarded from the outset." End quote. These are exactly the same words that Leo XIII used. For the Freemasons, there is no revealed religion. Quote, "From the first thesis, undoubtedly the most important, no philosophico-religious system exists that can impose an exclusive obligation." End quote. Thus, according to their thesis, there is no religion that can say that it alone is true. Quote, "Hence, whatever the tone employed, even if insults are not bandied, even if the Church knows that today she is obliged to collaborate with other religious denominations, the impression must not be taken that the Church has no reason to consider as outmoded her attitude of weariness towards and refusal of Freemasonry." End quote. Freemasonry has not changed. Quote, "Thus, as soon as the Catholic Church began to examine the purport of the first 3 Masonic grades, she was obliged to note the existence of fundamental and insurmountable oppositions. Freemasonry has not changed in essence. Moreover, the Freemasons' worldview is essentially relativist. The International Lexicon of the Freemasons, which is recognized as an objective source, affirms that Freemasonry is truly the only institution which has succeeded in preserving itself free, to a great extent, of dogmas, ideologies, and praxis. Freemasonry can be considered as a movement that aims to gather men of relativist persuasion to promote the humanist ideal. Such subjectivism cannot be reconciled with faith in the revealed Word of God." End quote. The Freemasons deny the possibility of an objective knowledge of truth. The German bishops continue their findings. Refusal of a unique objective truth. Quote, "During the course of the colloquies, the maxim of the Freemason Lessing was notably cited. Quote, If God held in his right hand all the truth, and in his left hand just the search for truth, even in conceding that I was eternally mistaken, and he said to me, Choose, I would fling myself with humility to his left." End quote. End quote. So, if God held the truth in one hand, and in the other the search for truth, Lessing would go towards the left hand in order to remain in the search for truth, rather than receive truth. It is unbelievable. Quote, and the Freemason continues, "And I would say to him, to God, Father, damn me, the pure truth is for you alone. As for me, I prefer to be always seeking truth. I choose the search for truth." End quote. How frightening it is to reject truth and to say, "Let the good Lord damn me rather than give me the truth." Let us remark, moreover, that if one studies attentively the texts issued by Vatican Council II, whether Gaudium et Spes or Dignitatis Humanae on religious liberty, one finds the same notion. We are all together. All the religions seek the truth. How could the Church have affirmed such a thing? We are not seeking the truth. We have it. All that was to please the Freemasons and the Protestants, who also share the Masonic theories expressed by relativism. Quote, "The relativity of all truth constitutes the basis of Freemasonry," the German bishops continue. "Thus there is no objective truth, which involves a refusal in principle of all the dogmatic positions. Such a concept of truth is not compatible with the Catholic concept of truth, nor with the point of view of natural theology, nor with that of the theology of revelation. For the Freemasons, the conception of religion is relativist. All the religions are concurrent attempts to express divine truth." End quote. Behold how the Freemasons define the religions even now. Fortunately, the German bishops mustered some courage and published this text, which is the first since the Council to express the matter so clearly. Might one not then be astonished to read in the Civiltà Cattolica, which is published at Rome, an article by a famous Jesuit who, during the Council, showed himself to be ardently in favor of dialogue with the Freemasons, that scorns the bishop's findings. He writes, quote, "Oh, that may be true for Germany, but not elsewhere," end quote. And this is what is found in the most important Catholic journal published at Rome and directed by Jesuits. It is frightening. Ever since the Council, then, there has been a will to come to terms with the Freemasons. Yet this is impossible. It would spell the ruin of our theology and our philosophy. Nothing would remain. It is not without interest to make this digression when studying the declaration Leo XIII made over 100 years ago. A century later, in our period, the principles of the Freemasons are the same. They have not changed. They cannot stand the Church. The Church is necessarily, fundamentally opposed to Freemasonry. They affirm that truth is relative, we that it is objective. They declare that there are no dogmas, and we that there is a revealed truth and dogmas. Accord is therefore impossible. That is why the Freemasons will continue to do everything, as Leo XIII affirmed, to attempt to destroy the Church, because necessarily she is against them. There is an essential incompatibility. Their naturalist principle is in formal opposition to the Church's doctrine. This is what the Pope affirms. Quote, "In those matters which regard religion, let it be seen how the sect of the Freemasons acts, especially where it is more free to act without restraint, and then let anyone judge whether in fact it does not wish to carry out the policy of the naturalists. By a long and persevering labor, they endeavor to bring about this result, namely, that the office and authority of the Church may become of no account in the civil state." End quote.